Hello, welcome to For F1 Stake, a podcast by two idiotic Formula One fans chatting absolute nonsense and offering our ridiculously biased opinions. I'm Tom.
And I'm Brad, and I guess this is episode 1.5, really, isn't it, Tom?
It is, yeah. We did record an episode last week, and unfortunately, it did not see the light of day due to the fact that I was not to be heard.
Yeah, we're still figuring it out.
We are still figuring it out. However, hopefully this one will be going out and you are able to hear both of us.
For the first time.
For the first time, yeah, absolutely. So, I think what we kind of wanted to discuss today, Brad, was kind of going through, as the title suggests, lap times, launches, and liveries. So, kind of starting off with the launch order was Haas. A lot of controversy surrounding Haas at the minute, but we'll start off from their initial launch. They were the first car to reveal the 2022 car.
Yeah.
What would be your initial thoughts?
Plain car, it's nothing special. I think this is the same car they had last year, really, just a few more flares, obviously, with the new design. But yeah, nothing special. I'm not a big fan of this car.
Yeah, it's a bit lackluster, isn't it? I was expecting a lot more, considering the fact that they'd swapped their development curve for the 2022 car, the earliest of any team on the grid. Surely that would mean we're going to see something a bit more spectacular. You'd think that they would want to push something out there that would say, right, Haas is here, we're ready to go. You know, we have a good car now.
Yeah, and I remember we discussed this last week, how this car actually looked a little bit like the Russian flag. I don't want to get too controversial this straight away, but I thought it was boring last week, and you look at it now, it's even more boring. So I'm wondering what they're going to do before the race starts in mid-March.
Yeah, I mean, at the time of recording this, Haas are due to release a statement on all this Russia controversy next week. And I think potentially, if it is a case that the Uralkali sponsorship is completely dropped and Mazepin is out of the team, we might see a return to the original Haas logo with the black, grey and red theme, which I think would be okay.
Yeah, I think I prefer it almost, to be honest.
I think they just need
a launch then.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, they could do that, and if they do start to perform well, they are a mid-table team. Then they might be able to get a title sponsor that will, maybe change the look of the car. We'll see.
You know what? So they've had pretty unlucky sponsors in the past with Rich and everything like that. So
what unbelievable history. Gene Haas must be the most stressed Formula One team owner on the planet.
You'd think he would have given up by now, to be fair enough to carry on going in Formula One, because it's obviously not an easy place to be, especially when this is going on.
Literally, yeah, it is ridiculous. The amount of controversy and setbacks the Haas team have had is unbelievable.
It can't get any worse for them right now, it really can't. And I feel sorry for them in a way, because I can't see Mazepin staying on. I think there's been so much hate around Mazepin the last few days.
Yeah, well, the things he's come out and said haven't helped his case whatsoever. And I think the controversy that we had before he even started in F1, it's been a bit of a shit show from day one, really, to be honest. I mean, they're lucky that they've got a good driver in Mick Schumacher, and he kind of saves face a little bit for the team as a whole.
He does, especially with his history in the sport with his family and everything. So
exactly, it brings some form of, credence to the team.
To the team, but I think if we do see someone like Mazepin drop from this team, I think we're probably going to see Giovinazzi come back. Maybe will he drive for them?
Well, they're suggesting that it would be Pietro Fittipaldi that would take over the seat. Well, that's what Gunther Steiner said initially, and so again, a lot of heritage between those two drivers.
Massive heritage.
Yeah, so you'd think that in itself would bring on some title sponsorships.
Yeah, surely. I think
but
just having Mick there's enough. I think we'll see someone coming, but that's it's to be seen. What's going to happen with that, we don't know.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's interesting from testing. Like we said, they'd swapped over to the 2022 development earlier than any other team. We know that they completely wrote off the 2021 car, but yet we're still plagued with issues. They had an oil leak on day 2, I think, which ended their running early. And then day 3, obviously, had all this controversy, which I think overshadowed their testing schedule. And I think,
but Mick couldn't get out either. It's not just Mazepin that couldn't get out in this car. I think neither of them really got any solid laps in. obviously the oil leaks and it didn't help, and it looked like they had cooling issues at the same time. And I, I don't even know. This was a horrible weekend and week for
Yeah,
Haas. It's just going to get worse as well.
yeah, and I feel for the team as a whole. Obviously, don't feel for the Mazepins, but in terms of Gene Haas, Mick Schumacher, Gunter Steiner's had so much shit to deal with this week that just completely detracts from the job that they're paid to do. I do feel sorry for them, and I hope they do have a decent car to bring to the Bahrain test in a couple of weeks' time. I
Yeah,
mean, luckily this is essentially categorized as a shakedown, and so iron out the bumps this week and show up to Bahrain for the next test with a proper car with a bit of competitiveness built in. But
we'll
we
see.
can
We'll
only
see.
hope. We can only hope.
Yeah, let's move on from Haas. I think there's a lot you could talk about with Haas, but we'll yeah, it's very different to last week at least.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next car to launch was Red Bull. The launch itself, we discussed this on the original podcast that never heard the light of day. Um, was a bit of a nothing launch due to the
Yeah, it
fact that
was.
they'd just pasted the Red Bull livery onto the F1 show car,
Yeah,
essentially.
every year it's the same thing. I mean, the launch is never anything special from Red Bull, and this is the same car we see every year. Nothing's really changed.
Yeah,
Apart from the car itself. I mean, this is a. I feel like Red Bull's got a completely different car to any other team. It just doesn't look similar. All the side pod and everything. We've obviously seen a lot about it this week
yeah. Well, the
through
car that
testing.
we saw that turned up in Barcelona was night and day
Yeah,
different.
it was.
Not only from the show car that they launched the livery on, but from everybody else's car. That shows Adrian Newey, at his finest. Um,
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
it was
Uh,
just so bizarre, almost bizarre, alien looking car in comparison to the rest of the field. And we were worried that we weren't going to get too much variation with such prescriptive regulations. But
Do you think it's good as unpainted though? That side pod was unpainted, wasn't it?
yeah, interesting. It seems like it's been a last minute change almost. But from what I'd seen on leaked pictures of the filming day at Silverstone, it was still unpainted there. So I don't know whether that's just been a particularly new part that they've only just recently added to the car. I don't know.
Yeah,
But it did
yeah,
look a little bit unfinished, the Red Bull.
a little bit. I think it runs through the Red Bull teams, but yeah, this is a really big year for Red Bull. I think this is arguably one of their biggest years going into this year, and they've got to perform again. I think Max has got a lot of pressure on him again to kind of outperform Lewis. Yeah,
Yeah, I think this is good. This is going to be a case of Red Bull have to hit the ground running with these new regulations because they can't start off on the back foot again like they did in 2017.
yeah,
If they're going to want to compete for the championship, I think that like I said, they're going to have to hit the ground running this year, and really they should be able to do that with ease with the fact that they've got Adrian Newey as the chief technical officer.
yeah.
Um, there's no excuse essentially for Red Bull. They've got Max Verstappen, they've got Adrian Newey, they've got the backing of Red Bull. It should be a walk in the park, really.
It's
Um,
two solid drivers there, two really solid
there
drivers.
is.
I think
It's going to be
Checo
an
has showed
interesting.
himself.
It's going
Yeah,
to be an
it will
interesting
be.
year for Checo, I think,
Yeah,
because he performed, I think, towards the back end of last season, but he did fall away in a few races. He just wasn't to be seen.
yeah. But we were there to see, I think, the finest of Checo because that when he was holding Lewis, and we were actually in Abu Dhabi for anyone that's listening. So we watched this race, and to watch what Perez was doing to Lewis, it's insane, really, how well he managed to hold him on that lap. And I think if he can do that for a season and really help, I wouldn't want to say help Max. I want to see him perform as well. But yeah, he can do it. He's got so much about him.
He does.
Special driver.
The way that he held Lewis off in Abu Dhabi was sensational. I think there's not a person on the planet that watched that race that doesn't agree with that statement. He was unbelievable.
Mm.
And even so, in terms of providing Max with the fastest lap to get him on pole position for the start of the race, in the way that he slipstreamed him down that straight, which we saw the end of. We were
Yeah.
perfectly positioned to see the end of that.
Yeah.
He was a proper team player in Abu Dhabi, and I think we've seen glimpses of how good he can be. It's just whether he can be consistent across the season.
Was his car
Um,
fine when he retired in that race as well?
there's been no information on that. It's
I know.
bizarre.
I can't believe no one's talked about that because that was the strangest thing. When he comes and he goes, "Oh, yeah, okay, all right, I'm coming in."
Yeah, but
Like,
it's like
like
Red
how that
Bull.
happened?
it's strange in a way. It's almost as if Red Bull had done that in order to concede the constructors' championship for ways of providing themselves with more wind tunnel testing time for this season. Who knows? It seemed suspicious because there was no inclination to the fact that there was anything wrong with the car. We were surprised when we saw it on track because they hadn't mentioned it. He
just
just
came in.
seemed to disappear. Then with the controversy that
Oh
curtailed
God.
from that, it fell into the background. But yeah, very bizarre.
Flipping the TV. Flipping the TV. We'll get into him.
But as Red Bull as a whole, in terms of testing this week, I mean they've been third and fourth on the timing sheets overall behind Mercedes. It's kind of like the status quo, I think, at the minute. But I mean, lap times are fairly, irrelevant at this stage. They don't really
they
give
were
much information.
consistent in the wet as well. So I think this car should be fine. I think we'll say that, and then we'll see what happens in the first race.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot more to be discussed, especially after the Bahrain test in a couple of weeks' time. We'll see if we might even see a completely different car again from Red Bull. There's also talks of Mercedes coming in with a B-spec car, but we'll save that for a little bit later.
Yeah, we'll save that.
Moving on then, the next car that was launched was the Aston Martin. So this was our first look at a real-life F1 car for this season in person. And it didn't disappoint. It was fairly shocking in terms of the concept. That might be due to the fact we hadn't really seen a proper car yet. But they'd gone into a fairly unique direction, I think you'd agree.
Yeah, no, I love this. The way they launched this, I thought was really interesting actually, with having all three of these new cars, and the safety car I think was there as well.
Did you
seen.
watch the launch?
I did, yeah. I watched most of
What
this launch.
did you see Lawrence Stroll's address to the audience? It is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. He's like a robot.
He is bizarre though, isn't he?
He's
Every
very
time I see
bizarre.
him, he's the strangest guy, and I think Lance is pretty strange as well.
They just don't seem to have any emotion. It's like he was being asked a question by the presenter. He'd look at her, nod, and then look away from her, and then answer the question to the audience. And it was just so strange and robotic. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. If you've not
think there was even
seen,
many people.
there wasn't that many people there. But if you've ever seen, if you've not seen Lawrence Stroll being interviewed, please go onto YouTube and type it in and watch it. And it's just so stunted and robotic. It's bizarre. I don't think he's human. I just don't. I don't think he's
reading off something. I reckon the screen even says "turn to camera, look at camera, speak to audience." Like,
yeah, literally, he's got that in his ear.
Idea. Yeah, he's always like that though. But yeah, enough about him, because it means nothing what he's doing. It's more about Lance and Seb in this car, because I think this could be a big year for Aston. The car looks incredible.
Yeah, I love that lime green accent as opposed to the old BWT pink. I think this suits the car so much better, and it's a reflection of Aston Martin of old in terms of their GT cars.
Yeah,
it works really well.
I think I've seen a little bit of divide on Twitter and Instagram and things about this car. So some people are saying it kind of just doesn't look right, but this is an Aston color. That's what Aston's meant to look like. So if you don't like that, that's your issue. But I think having Seb and Stroll in this car is still. We talked about this again last week, but having Lance looking up to someone like Seb and having the experience in this team, I think it's going to be really big again. I just hope this is a good year for Aston, really.
Yeah, I mean, like I'd mentioned, they've gone with a fairly radical concept. In terms of what we've seen in testing, the only thing that I could see in terms of other teams that were running the same sort of concept was the Alfa Romeo, surprisingly. And so it's going to be interesting to see whether they can kind of pull through and make sure that they. Brad, I think you might have stopped recording. Actually,
no,
got a warning symbol. This recording failed and is stopped. Please check the host's sidebar for more info. Something went wrong during recording.
We're back on.
I think we're back on. Yeah, I'll be able to cut that out if I do it in post edit. I should be able to cut that section out.
Yeah, it's fine. I don't know what happened there. That's weird.
Yeah, bizarre.
Right, you keep an eye on that. Let me put this screen back on.
So let's hope it's not got rid of the bit before you left.
It's restarted. The time started again now.
Is it?
For me, it has anyway.
Mine's still saying 14 minutes. Let's hope we've not lost that recording.
Yeah. All right. Well, Which
Oh
is the one
God.
I'm going to go. Right, carry on.
Right. Okay. The concept is fairly similar to the Alfa Romeo in terms of they've got this big undercut underneath the side pod and then a very wide side pod with the louvers on top for cooling. And so it's interesting that there's only 2 teams that have decided to go down that route. And so we'll either see a Aston Martin Alfa Romeo title fight, or we might just see Alfa Romeo and Aston Martin dwindling off the back of the grid.
Yeah, I think probably the latter, but we're going to wait and see. I like the fact they've got this new design to it. It's completely different to what we saw from the Red Bull and the Haas before on the releases. So yeah, it's they look fine in testing. I don't think they were terrible, but again, it's just
No, again, they were plagued with a few issues. I mean, Fireman Seb made an appearance on day 3, I think it was, after an oil leak caused a fire. Is it an oil leak or a hydraulic leak? I can't remember the one. But I mean, in terms of the pairing, Lance Stroll doesn't really do much for me. I kind of feel he's a bit of a he's just a marker more than anything. He's not. He's never going to fight for a championship as much as Daddy Stroll would love him to, and
Daddy
seems
Stroll.
to suggest he will. I don't think that's going to be the
Yeah,
case.
I don't know. He's not the most special driver ever, and Seb was obviously a fan favorite. I feel like he's just getting more and more popular as he gets older.
He is, because I think, when you're winning week in, week out, you lose a little bit of popularity just due to the fact that, everybody's sick of seeing you win. With Seb, obviously he's had the success in the past, and now he's at a point now where if he was to win a race or even fight for the championship, everyone would be on his side because of the fact that he's kind of fought his way back. But he's not afraid to speak up on issues, especially this week in terms of the Russia controversy. He's made his opinion quite clear even before F1, which I think was really good, and I think he does need to stand up. That he's kind of like the dad of the paddock, really, isn't he?
He is now. Yeah, well, now that Kimmy's gone, I mean, Kimmy, you can't really see Kimmy as a dad anyway because he was just so blunt with everything that he talked about. But
Yeah.
I love Seb. I think he's just so down to earth and a very normal guy. I mean, he turns up on his little cycle bike every week, and he's just a cool guy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm hoping we see some good things from Aston this year.
So next on the order was McLaren. And so with McLaren, I mean, I am a self-confessed McLaren fan. I'm most likely to be more biased to McLaren more than any other team. The launch was okay. It was nice to kind of have a launch with the drivers and the team bosses, and a little bit similar to Aston Martin, but it was a fairly decent launch. I'm not 100% sold on the livery.
No, nor am I. I'm not sure. Actually, now we've seen it on track as well. I think it actually looks better than what I thought it looked in the launch.
Yeah,
It really pops. I
yeah,
can't lie.
I would agree with that. I just find it a little bit too complicated, a bit fiddly, livery wise. I know what they've tried to do in terms of taking the ethos of the Gulf livery that they had in Monaco last year, but
It's not
I
worked, has
don't
it?
think it's no. Personally, I don't. It's nowhere near the Gulf livery.
It never will be. I wanted to see the Golf livery on this car. I think a lot of people did, but it's not really McLaren's thing to do right now, is it? It's not going to
It's
work out.
no, it's a bit of a shame. I mean, I used to love the was it 2019 livery that they had the blue triangles fading in from the back of the car. I think that was one of their
Yeah,
best
I think they
liveries.
need that. I don't know why they haven't got more design on this. I think it looks okay the way it is, but it's kind of. I mean, you can see in the picture that I've got on screen now. It's kind of just a plain, like around here. It's just
It's fairly
plain.
simple, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's okay. It's but that's beside the point. The main factor is, does it perform? And from what we've seen in testing this week, it looks like it does. A lot of the
it's
media
fast.
outlets are saying that this could be a dark horse. McLaren could be, fingers crossed, in a title fight with the Red Bull, Mercedes, and even the
Every
Ferrari.
year they say this. Every year it's McLaren a bit of a dark horse because they just keep getting better. They're getting better every single year. I think the drivers are getting more points. I mean, well, Lando is at least. I think Ricardo had a bit of a shocker last year, but the
Yeah,
drivers they've got in this team, two of my favourites to be honest.
they're definitely on an upward curve, and I think of all
Mm.
the teams, they are on the steepest upward curve. They've got two fantastic drivers. Ricardo had a bit of a meh year last year. I mean, he did win a race, obviously, which is an amazing result. But on the whole, his consistency hasn't been up to scratch. He's been a bit disappointing. I think this is going to be a big season for Ricardo.
Yeah,
I think if he can't pull it out of the bag this year and match Norris, weekly in terms of results, I think that next year will be his last year because his contract is due to expire at the end of next year. But we'll see. It might be Ricardo Norris for the championship fight. Who knows?
Oh, you would love that, wouldn't you?
I would love that. Yeah, I mean, I'd want Norris to win, but
I think
it
I'd
would be
love it as
great.
well. But I mean, these are two great drivers. I love Lando especially. I think which is what he has for the community in general is enough for me.
He's
I'm not
he
bothered
is
about how he performs. I just love him.
he is owed a win. That's all I'll say. He's
Oh, he's
definitely owed a
massively
win.
owed the win. He should have won already. I think we've seen some really good performances from Lando last year, and he's quick on track. And he's probably one of the quicker drivers, I'd say. If he was in a little bit faster car last year, I think he would have a really good chance at a few wins.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
yeah,
It's a
we'll see.
shame. It's a shame he didn't manage to get the win in Russia because he really deserved that. It was just a difficult
Mm,
call.
yeah.
But hopefully this car will provide them with a regular podium sitter, if not a regular
Well,
race winner.
he won't be winning in Russia this year, will he?
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Right. Let's go on to AlphaTauri.
AlphaTauri was a bizarre
Agreed.
launch.
It was awful.
It was terrible. I've never seen Yuki Tsunoda look more ridiculous than he did on that launch with his overfitting clothes, his purple jumper, and then Pierre Gasly just looking completely wooden. It was bizarre. It was very bizarre.
He just looked lost, didn't he, Gasly? He looked like he had no idea what he was there for.
They both did. They just looked like they'd been drugged and then slapped in front of a green screen.
Yeah, it's true, and it's weird because this car it's not a special car either. So it looked like the most plain release, and it kind of fits some of the other Red Bull cars, to be honest. But it was all photoshopped. Nothing looked real.
Yeah.
It was a. I mean, actually looking at the car on the release, it was just a bit boring. It's the same as what we've seen last year. I don't really like the matte colors going in these cars and things like that. But
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, something that I mentioned last week was the fact that this blue that they're using on the AlphaTauri is so muted. It's not really got much saturation, much color to it. It just looks a bit. It's just a bit
just plain.
dry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to use the blue, make it a blue. Like the last Toro Rosso livery, that deep, rich blue with the silver was amazing. And then they've gone with
Mm.
this really flat, boring color. They might as well have just made it black and white. I
Might
think it
have
would
looked
have
better in
popped a
black
little
and
bit
white.
more.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
black and white would have looked really good in this car. But yeah, this again on the track. This car it actually looks a little bit better than we saw in the release, but uh, not the best testing ever for them.
Yeah, they were
Yeah,
fairly quiet, I think, through testing. I
yeah,
didn't see much from them.
nothing.
I think AlphaTauri are always going to be a solid midfield team.
Hmm.
I think they will struggle to kind of push past that, just due to the fact of they will only do 80% as well as Red Bull could ever do, just due to the difference in resources. I mean, they've got a really good driver with Pierre Gasly. I don't like him just because of the fact he takes the results away from McLaren.
It's a good driver. Don't like him.
Only
Yeah,
because of the fact that when he has a good day, it means McLaren often doesn't, which also pisses
yeah.
me off.
I've never actually thought about the fact that this is the Red Bull sister team that kind of will never outperform the Red Bull. Like, what is the actual point in this car? It's just there's no reason to have it. This should be a Formula 2 car, if anything.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I mean, it's they're good enough to be a true midfield team. They're good
Yeah,
enough
they are.
to beat 4 other teams most often than not, and they ultimately should have beaten Alpine last season. Um, they were unlucky with that, but I think that's just due to the fact that they've got not a pay driver, but a marketed driver in Yuki
Mm.
Tsunoda. He's not really there on merit. He's there to bring in interest from Honda, essentially, isn't he? And I imagine when the
That's why
Honda
he's
tie
there.
is fully removed, whether Yuki Tsunoda will still be there
Oh no,
because
I can't see him there. I think there's better drivers than him. Um, even now, I mean, what's happened to the champion from Formula 2 last year? Where's he gone?
Oscar Piastri, yeah, I mean he's now the reserve driver for Alpine, and
There you
so
go. So Alpine is just going to have a better year again. If they lose someone, there you go. That's a pretty good driver coming straight in.
yeah, I feel sorry for Oscar Piastri because uh, he won Formula 3, then Formula 2 in consecutive seasons, and then missed out on a Formula 1
Yeah,
seat
debut.
because you've
Yeah.
got Nikita Mazepin in the Haas and you've got Juan Yu Zhou Juan Gougeot, however you say it, in the
Juan
Alfa
Goujon.
Romeo.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know enough about
Juan Chicken Goujon.
yeah, Juan Goujon. But what's with Oscar? I don't know much about his family background, but I'm guessing they don't have the kind of money that Mazepin's family are putting forward, and people like I'm sure Sonoda's got so much support behind him because of Honda and everything like that. So that's probably what he's missing out on, which is such a shame for the sport.
It is, and I think this cost cap that's come into play now, I think should hope negate some of this pay driver scenarios, in a sense that teams aren't being maxed out per year. I mean, Christ, Mercedes and Ferrari are spending about $500 million a year in
It's stupid,
2018,
isn't it?
which is
It's just
absolutely
stupid.
insane. Which has now been reduced to $140 million, I think it is this season, reducing to 135 next year. It might be 145, 140 next year. I'm not too
Yeah, I
sure.
mean, how that was even allowed in the first place is really beyond me, because it was such a bad period for the sport, and I think this is the first year where it's interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of people challenging for the top spot. At least I hope
Yeah,
there is.
yeah. Well, it's kind of a it's in a sense similar to the financial fair play that you see in the Premier League. They're trying to level the playing field, and the fact that if you're in the bottom half of the grid in the first half of the season, you've
Mm.
got extra wind tunnel development time for the second half of the season, and then vice versa for the top half of the grid. And so it should. I mean, Christ, if we can get a 20-car championship battle, that would be amazing.
Oh, what a world! What a world!
That would be unbelievable, but.
And even
It,
then, Mazepin would still be at the back of the pack.
Even then, Mazepin would still be at the back. And I'm sure everybody's seen Jeremy Clarkson's tweet this week, but we won't mention that.
Savage, that one. It really was. I can't believe he's put that out. That must have come up by now. Surely something's happened with that.
I
That can't have been
I
allowed.
wouldn't be surprised if he's been banned off Twitter.
It must have been for the 15th time.
Anyway, moving on then. The next car to release was the Williams. And so the launch itself was a bit bleh. I mean,
Again.
the livery, I'm more positive about it than most people online were. I don't think it's as bad as people were suggesting. I don't like the red accents on it. I don't think they work at all. But I think as a whole, the livery's smart. It's very corporate.
Yeah, it is. I think the more I look at this car, the more I think that it is a little bit of a corporate car. I like it. I think the release is interesting, the way they showed the car. But yeah, the more I look at it, it's more bang average. On track, it kind of looks a bit lost as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think on track, it's similar to what they were saying with the Aston Martin last season, was the colour is amazing up close, but when it's on track on TV, you can't really get that colour through. It kind of came out
No.
looking black, and I think that's going to be a similar situation for the Williams. And I think that's partly the reason why a lot of the teams have gone for matte colours, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but it makes sense
show up
in that
better.
respect. Yeah. But the positive for Williams was they've had a really good week in testing. I think on day 2, they were the 4th fastest on the timesheet. So this is a completely revised Williams from what we saw in
George as well.
2019.
Yeah. I mean, these are okay drivers. I don't think they're the best drivers ever. I hate Latifi. But
if you can't tell, Brad is a huge Hamilton fan. Hence, he has this vendetta for Nicholas Latifi.
I don't want him to be around any longer than he needs to be.
I like Latifi. I think he's a nice guy. He doesn't run his mouth. Obviously he's a pay driver, but there was a couple of occasions last season where he managed to outscore George Russell, which is no easy task. Yeah, exactly. And I think I don't mind Latifi being in there. It's kind of how I felt about Baby Stroll in his first couple of seasons until he started buying up Formula One teams. But I think as a whole, I don't mind Latifi. I think Alexander Albon, his ego seemed to grow in his first year when he moved to Red Bull. And I think that was to the detriment of his racing. But I think
we saw some good racing from Albon already. We know he's got it, but it's just I think he's got more experience coming back into it now. Obviously not in Formula One cars, but he's been driving other cars still, and I'm looking forward to Albon. I think he's got a really good story behind him as well. He's not just a kind of like a pay to win driver, is he? He's just got a lot of history with his family, like being Thai, and interesting one. I like Albon.
Yeah, let's see if he gets shoved off the track by Lewis Hamilton again this year.
He will. 100%. Lewis does that to anyone. That's just good racing. It's clean and lovely racing from Lewis.
It wasn't clean. It wasn't lovely. He got penalised for it.
I think Albon just went for the wrong corners.
When we say we have a biased opinion, we really mean it.
Yeah, well, Latifi's a Max fan. I like Alex, but yeah, Lewis and showed him the ropes,
Well, moving on then. We then had the Ferrari launch, and this was the biggest shock, I think, in terms of how the car looked. The most radical side pod design
Hmm.
I've seen.
Mental.
Even maybe not perhaps eclipsing the Red Bull when we did finally see it at testing, but interesting concept at the very least. The livery, the car in its in a whole, I think looks
Oh,
fantastic.
it's sexy. It's just as sexy as Charles and Carlos.
Yeah, it
Beautiful car.
it's had unequivocal kind of praise, hasn't it? Really,
Yeah.
I don't know a single person that said no. I don't like that. I think everybody said
How
that
could
car
you
looks
even say that?
fantastic.
This is the most Ferrari looking Ferrari we've had in a long time.
Yeah, I just love the black wings. Taking it back to the 641 or 614 Ferrari in the 80s. I just think it looks fantastic, and I think
Mm.
with the black wheel covers, I think with the Ferrari, it suits them the most. As much as they do look a little bit like steel wheels, um, at a distance, the black wheels with the black wings and the darker red, I think it looks brilliant.
Yeah,
I
it's a
think they've done a
mega
really good
looking
job
car.
with that,
Yeah,
and it
really.
seems to be fast. I, as much of a McLaren fan as I am, I would quite actually like to see Ferrari fighting for the title more so than Red Bull and Mercedes this year. McLaren Ferrari title fight would be
Oh, back to
fantastic.
the old days. I still want to see everyone else challenging too, but yeah, I completely agree. I think Ferrari, they've had struggles through COVID, and hopefully this is the first car that's going to come out on track and actually show us what it can do. I mean, first day of testing, this car was mega. Like it was putting in really good laps. Both drivers said they were happy with the car, which is completely different to what it's been for the last couple of years.
Yeah. And they've
Yeah.
had the reliability there as well. I mean, they were the only team to surpass 400 laps over the 3-day
Oh,
test.
were they? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it
400,
seems
jeez.
that car is pretty solid. I mean, they've benefited from the fact that out of the teams that have got the most to spend or the most resources, they've had the most wind tunnel testing time, the most CFD items that they can utilize. And so I
Mm.
think they're in a really good position this year. And I said it last week. I think Ferrari are going to be my favourites for a title fight. So I'm putting it out there. I'm saying Carlos Sainz for world champion 2022. He's going to be Charles Leclerc again because everybody underestimates Sainz, and I think he's going to clinch the title in the last few races of the season.
Yeah, two good drivers. I think they've got a really good chance this year. If this car really performs, I think there's a solid chance that these guys are challenging. So we'll have to see if they've got the beans to keep up with who we know might be top.
Yeah, and we missed Ferrari on the top step. I mean,
I
they
do.
obviously had the domination of the Schumacher era, but I
Yeah.
think that they've paid their dues. They've had a few years of you know unconvincing cars, and I think this looks fast. It looks good. They've got good drivers. I think everything should kind of fall into place for Ferrari this year. I expect to see, at the very least, to see them on the top step of the podium quite a few times.
Mm.
But that remains to be seen. Who knows? They could be at the back of the grid.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. So next on the list was Mercedes. They had a fairly long, drawn out, marketed launch. Toto and George and Lewis were all on good form. The car itself looked completely different from the renders that they released shortly after the launch, which was bizarre. We're now back to the silver livery. Brad, you're a big Lewis Hamilton fan. Let's hear your thoughts
I
on the Mercedes
absolutely
livery.
love Lewis. It's the best car ever. Lewis is the best driver ever. I've got nothing bad to say about this car, to be honest. I think going back to the Silver Arrows, that's what I wanted as a Mercedes and Lewis fan. But yeah, having George there to challenge Lewis, I think it's going to be more than what Bottas could provide, even though I think he was a great teammate to Lewis. I think this will be the first year we're actually going to see two really competitive Mercedes drivers pushing each other. And I think we've already seen that a little bit through testing, even though that's testing.
Yeah, I think you're right in that. I think Bottas was a good number two driver. With George being there, they've got two number one drivers. I
Yeah.
mean, this is going to be a huge test for George. We really will see what he's made of this year. And it's a little bit. It's quite similar to. I mean, obviously, the more extreme sense of Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso at McLaren.
Mhm.
Fernando was the established two-time world champion, and then
Lewis can
Lewis comes
improve
in
himself.
and pretty much matches him and beats him, you know. And so that showed us, how good Lewis Hamilton was. Are we going to see the same from George this year or over the next couple of years? I think so.
Yeah,
Uh,
I do hope
every
so. I actually want
everybody in the
George to do
know
well.
seems to suggest that
Yeah,
George is something special. Um, but we'll see. I think the car as a whole looks a bit drab. I've got to be honest. I
I
like the fact
think
they've gone to silver, but I'm
I
not
love it.
massive on the overall design.
I think it looks really good, and I think I said the same thing last week as well. That I think this might be the best looking car. I think on
Really?
track, yeah, on track, I love the look of this car. I thought it looked amazing. But yeah, I'm not really, to be honest, I'm not really bothered about how this car looks. I just know how these two are going to perform. I mean, they're already top the charts for testing, which really means not really anything. But yeah, it's so much pressure on. I think there's a lot of pressure on both of these drivers this year. Actually, even though Lewis is such champion already, I think he's got a lot to say. And Max got the win essentially. I can't believe that, but yeah, Lewis has got a lot to do.
He does, yeah. I mean, I think Lewis benefits from the fact that he has achieved so much. There's not really much. I don't personally think there's a lot of pressure on Lewis. If it's a case he doesn't perform, he can just put it down to age. He's already won 7 world championships.
True, yeah.
He doesn't really have to show anything. But I think obviously it's in his nature to do so. It's just going to be really interesting to actually get a feel for, okay, how quick is George Russell? Because Bottas has infamously come out and said he doesn't see anybody beating Hamilton in the same machinery.
Mm.
And so that'll be pretty embarrassing if if George Russell can beat him. It just kind of shows Bottas was a bit shit, but he wasn't. He was very good.
I think he was good. I think he was a great number 2 driver, and I want to speak about Bottas a little bit more another time. But I think, yeah, this is a huge year for George, and I just pray that he has a good one. I know I love George. I think he's a great driver. He's interesting. He's funny.
Yeah, I think he's of all the drivers, he's got the most natural talent.
Definitely.
I think there's big things coming for George Russell this year. I think it's
He's in
going to
this
be a
car for a
really.
reason.
He is exactly that. Mercedes were hesitant to put him in there. We've seen what he did at Williams. In such a mediocre car, he's able to outperform that car so much. To whether he can do the same with the Mercedes, um, it remains to be seen. But I mean, Mercedes are in such a strong position with those two drivers. Um, the only thing that will, potentially ruffle some feathers is whether that car is as fast as it looks.
Yeah, yeah. I think it will be. I mean, we've already seen good laps from this car, and it looks like they've had a really good testing again. So
They're just
yeah,
unflappable. The team just seems
they
to be
are.
completely unflappable. They just seem to just
I don't know what it is.
dial it in every
I don't
every
know how they
year. They
do it
seem to
every
do
year.
it.
I don't know
Yeah.
if it's they've just got the best staff, or I don't know what it is. This car is just always solid.
Well, yeah. Well, Toto was saying in the launch, he said, I was having to send people home that were doing 100-hour weeks. It's the
Yeah.
commitment that they've got to the factories is unwavering, and I think it really, really shows. Obviously, it does. I mean, they've won 8 constructors' championships in a row, which is ridiculous. 15 out of the last 16 they've won. Drivers and constructors combined, it's just unbelievable. Obviously, never been done before consecutively. Um, they're clearly a really strong outfit, and I think to suggest that they're not going to be the same this year would be foolish.
Yeah.
Um,
I still think Lewis will take it this year. I really do.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm hoping if anybody from the Mercedes wins it, I want it to be George. I think that would be really nice to see.
All right, Lewis Championship. Let's move on.
Okay. Okay, the next was Alpine. I didn't like the launch. I didn't like the car. I didn't like the livery. I love Fernando Alonso. Not that fussed on Esteban Ocon. Moving on.
Yeah, I don't think even the people that own Alpine like the cars. To be honest, I don't know what it was, but why have they got a dual livery for the first race? Like, I mean, come on, what?
I think
It's just
this has been a bit of a dichotomy between Alpine being F1 to show Alpine as a brand, and that's why they're in it, is to market that brand. But then BWT want an
mm,
entire team sponsorship and want to be, emblazoned across the entire car. And I think it's those two, coming at odds with each other, I think. And so it's a compromise for Alpine and a compromise for BWT in order to kind of get the big
Yeah,
car
it's
and
just a
not.
weird old car, isn't it? It's a weird team. I don't quite understand how Alpine have managed to sneak their way into Formula One. I'd rather be a Renault still, but
Well, I think it's Renault's performance brand, isn't it? I think that's the
yeah,
reasoning
but
behind it. But they behind the scenes, I mean, this whole malarkey with Alain Prost leaving and then them releasing it, the statement about it early, and him not being happy. There's something unsettling going on in the background with that team, I think, and they've had issues this week in testing in terms of fires they've had on the car. It was quite dramatic with
yeah,
Alonso stopping on track.
yeah, they've had a weird testing.
I think we could see Alpine at the back of the grid, at the back of the championship this year.
I
There's
do
just
as well.
something for me isn't clicking in that team at the minute.
But it's, what I don't like about Alpine, I actually don't like the brand in general, because when we were at the track in Abu Dhabi, we see all like the McLaren 720S flying around the track on the hot laps, and the Aston looks brilliant, the Superleggera, like all these crazy cars, and then Alpine comes around and you go, what the fuck is that? Like, how is it's not? It can't be a supercar, right? That cannot be a supercar.
It's the modern day sports car, isn't it? It's like the 911.
It
It's
doesn't
the
look modern
Porsche.
day. It looks shit.
Yeah,
And I
I
think
know
they've
it's
just
the
followed
Porsche
through
Cayman
with
as well.
this car. I don't think it looks great. The dual livery again looks like the
It
pink
just looks
Mercedes, to be
messy.
honest.
It's
But
just messy. That blue and the pink. You know, we've got a different blue on the BWTs to the blue that's on the actual Alpine
looked better
livery.
last year.
It's just, it's not for me. And I think that team has got some struggles. I think there's work to do for them in the background. I think a lot of work. This
Mm.
new CEO that's come on board as well, from what we've heard from Alain Prost, just wants to kind of hog the spotlight. I think it's a bit of a strange situation, which is a shame for Fernando Alonso because he's such a good driver. I really, really rate Fernando.
We speak about the
Um,
daddy of the pack being Seb, but I think we've got another one here.
yeah, he's just not as outspoken. Well, you know, he doesn't speak freely about issues like Seb does. You know, Seb is fairly. Um,
Yeah, he always pipes up about something, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does, but you know, he comes from a stance of, you know, reasoning. Fernando's more kind of just focused on the racing, but he's
Mm.
such a good driver. We know how good he is.
One of the best ever. But
Yeah,
we've got a lot to see from both of these drivers. I think Ocon's a little bit of an underdog every year. I think he's actually quite a consistent driver. He just hasn't got the car behind him.
yeah, I'd agree with that. I think Ocon is clearly a good driver because he's been a Mercedes reserve driver for a number of years, and so they see something in him clearly.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, and we know that Fernando is gonna get the most out of that car. It's just will they have the car underneath him? Which is a shame
Mm.
because, you know, Fernando has come back into Formula One specifically for these particular regulations, and so if it's a case that, you know, that car doesn't perform this year, we might very well likely see the last of Fernando Alonso, which would be
I
a
think
shame for the
he's too
sport.
old now. I think it's done. I mean, I like to say that, you know, these talented drivers are going to stay in Formula One, but even though these young drivers that have the rich daddies are coming in, they're all performing fairly well. But I think
Yeah,
there's more to see from young drivers. I really want to see people like Oscar come and take these cars and really push them.
yeah, definitely. I think F1 needs to commit more into ensuring that these drivers do get more of a shot. I think they need to outlaw the pay drivers. I think it should be a case of, you know, a little bit in a way like the Premier League. If it's a case that, you know, your team is last, you know, the slowest of the two drivers gets relegated, for example, and then,
Mm.
you know, the champion of the Formula 2 championship then moves into their place, and then that, you know, it works out that every year, so at least everybody's getting a fair shot. And if you're a good enough driver, you'll stay in Formula 1. You know, it's supposed to be the 20
Yeah.
best drivers on the planet. You know, we can't be having Nikita Mazepins clogging up the grid
Yeah.
because
How's
it's
that
not good for
happened?
the fans.
Really,
You
it's
know,
insane. It almost pisses me off, to be honest, that we're
yeah.
losing spots to drivers that should not be there. And it's such a shame. But he still got there somehow. You know, he's got to be a driver. He's not just not a driver. But
Well, this is it. You know, he has to earn his super license points. Weirdly, he manages to have earned some of those in Mercedes tests, which is very bizarre. That, you know, looking back in 2018, 19, he was doing test runs for Mercedes, which is weird.
I didn't know that.
Um, yeah, yeah. There's a few images of him online in his Mercedes gear doing tests for them. Whether but again, would it matter about the money because Mercedes have got so much of it? Who knows? Um,
Yeah.
but very weird. So then the last team then, which obviously been launched today, the day of filming, the filming of recording,
Yeah.
was the Alfa Romeo.
Yeah.
They released this camo livery for testing, which was neither here nor there. But we were saying before, you know, the merch looks really good. The hats, the hoodies with that camo looks fantastic. But the car itself has had a few issues this week.
It has, yeah.
Um,
It's been another one that struggled quite a bit. I think they didn't really get many laps in. Shame for
no,
both the drivers, but
I think them and Haas were well off the back in terms of number of laps led, which is bizarre again, considering the fact that they were the two teams that started this development the earliest of anybody. You'd think that they would be right at the front, but it clearly states that the issues are far deeper than we suspected. Like I was saying before, obviously Alfa Romeo have gone with the same concept as Aston Martin, with that deep undercut underneath
yeah.
the side pod. But yeah, I think we could see Valtteri Bottas at the back of the grid again, like he was with the
Yeah.
Williams.
The car's beautiful though. I really like the look of the car. I mean, it's kind of similar to last year, but it's that old style like writing in the back. That font is beautiful.
Yeah,
It
this
makes that
this
car pop out.
the livery that's launched today is quite it is a nice livery. I'm not sure about the angle of the red how it comes in, but I mean it's a minor point. That's the designer side of
Yeah,
me coming out.
means
But
nothing, does it? Yeah.
yeah, I think on a whole it looks fairly smart. I think the team branding is fairly smart in the Alfa Romeo, but it's just a shame that they've not got the car, got
Mm.
the car underneath them. To be
Well, we're
honest,
going to find out if it's any good, but it looks like they've had a lot of struggle. So
who knows? They could come to
maybe
Bahrain in a couple of weeks' time, and they've got the fastest car on the grid. They've sorted out all the gremlins, and it's unbelievable.
the
Um,
Gremlins.
yeah, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's kind of what I hope. I think, I mean, the experience they've got in Bottas and that team is huge.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's another one that I don't really see much coming from that team this year.
yeah, I'd agree with that. Um, so, I mean, one thing I actually wanted to discuss with you in terms of this 2022 calendar. I mean, we've got a new race this year, which I'm really looking forward to, which is Miami. And the
Oh yeah,
benefit of that is it's one of the first races. It's the fifth race of the season. Um,
I can't
uh,
wait. I cannot wait for Miami. I think the track looks incredible, and I've done like not done, but I've watched a lot of like test laps on that Miami, even though they're virtual. The track looks beautiful. It's gonna be very fast, similar to Saudi Arabia, but with more corners.
yeah, yeah. Well, Saudi Arabia is second on the grid, uh, on in the season this year, and that was such a good track last year. It was so
It
fast.
was just mental, though, wasn't it?
It
There's just
was, yeah.
crashes and like Max failing his qualifying lap, and
More of that. More of
straight
that, I
away,
say.
first thing in the season. I cannot wait. They need to do that track 15 times a year. It's so fun to watch.
Yeah, yeah. It was a really good circuit that, and I think as well we've also got Australia back on the calendar this year. Thank God.
Yeah, thank
It's
God,
been
thank God.
it's been out for a number of years because of COVID, and they've completely refurbed the track. I'm not sure if you've seen what they've done,
Mm.
but they've kind of straightened out quite a few of the corners, so Melbourne is going to be a lot faster again. And with the fact of these cars making the downforce through ground effect, they've got a lot less drag, and so they should have a higher top speed anyway. So we should be seeing some really fast laps from
I
these
love
cars.
Australia. I think it's one of my favorite tracks. For me, it should have been the first race of the season, but I don't know if there was rules around that or what, because Australia's been so closed out for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I just think it's been a difficulty, hasn't it? Australia's been so stringent with the COVID rules. Um,
Mm.
we're just hoping that it's a case that it does still go ahead. Nothing kind of interferes with it now, and we just get back to normality. I think in terms of the calendar, Singapore again, another one that's joined the calendar again this year. Singapore is probably one of my favourite tracks. I just love how tight it is, and the fact that it's so hot. That all the drivers say it's the most physically demanding track on the calendar.
Yeah,
I'm
it's an
really looking forward to
interesting
seeing.
mix of race. I don't know what's going to take Russia's spot now. I don't think we've heard too much about where that's going, or if it's just one less race for the season. I don't know,
I think
but
I think the thesis is that Turkey is taking over it. There's
Turkey.
been
Okay.
tickets being sold on the F1 website out of the blue,
Oh,
so we
really?
could see that that's replacing Russia.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I'm fine with the turkey, but I think that change of temperature, especially from going from Italy to Singapore, at least what we know right now, potentially Turkey in the middle, is huge for the drivers. I don't know if you've really looked at that calendar, but every single week it's completely different to where they were the week before,
yeah,
or 2 weeks or whatever.
yeah.
It's
It's
really
a.
interesting.
I do love having a 23 race calendar. The only one I'm not excited for is France because it's always the most boring race on the grid.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of France.
No, but
It's a
it's
bit
nice to see
pointless.
we've got two Italian Grand Prix again, Imola and Monza. 2 American Grand Prix. I think it looks like a pretty good Canada this year. New tracks, updated tracks, new cars. It's
Are
going
we
to
going to
be.
go to one?
We'll see. We'll see how much money we've got. The more of you that listen, the more likely we are to be able to go to one of the races.
We're broke. I really want to go to all of these races, to be honest. 1 year of my life, I want to go to watch every single race of the season.
Yeah.
It's got to be done. I'll probably be nearly dead by that point if I've got enough money for it.
Yeah.
It's so expensive.
Easily been our 90s. So, yeah, but I mean, moving on, I mean, the first race of the season is in Bahrain. We're going to kind of get a more of a true reflection on where the teams are going to be in that second test, as that's a week before the race, and so there's not a massive amount of change that they can make in the space of a week in terms of the philosophy of the car. I imagine what we see turning up to testing is kind of how the grid is going to be laid out. I mean, what's your thoughts for the season as a whole, Brad? I mean, in terms of drivers and what you
Yeah, I
think they
mean,
can achieve.
I feel like we're going to see a very similar lineup and everything with how Lewis is at the top, Max is challenging him. I think it's always going to be very similar. But going into Bahrain, it's a really interesting track to start on, because I think it's in a way similar to the Spanish track on testing, because it's got a similar layout, a lot of corners, a lot of really fast straights. But it's quite elevated, this track, isn't it?
The Bahrain track.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I feel like it is. I feel like going up sector one, I feel like straight uphill, isn't it? And they come back down. So not that really means anything, but it's quite a long track as far as Formula One tracks go. And yeah, I think Lewis is going to take this one again, because he likes that heat, and I think the car I reckon will perform really well in the heat.
George was pretty good though, wasn't he, when he stepped in for Mercedes for Hamilton a couple of years
Oh
ago?
no, not that race! I forgot about that. Oh my god, poor George.
Poor
Surely not
George.
again. That won't happen ever again.
That was a conspiracy. 100% that was a conspiracy.
It was just bollocks. I felt so sorry for him. How did that even happen? I mean, it's fucking Mercedes. It's Mercedes. You know, if that happened in a back of the grid kind of team, if that happened to Mazepin, we've gone, yeah, that's typical. But no, Mercedes, when George is coming in to win his first ever race, get his first points, I think it was.
It was very out of character, wasn't it? It was
So
such a shame. I wholeheartedly believe that was a conspiracy to stop George from being able to win that race.
yeah.
I think they purposely put a set of tyres on to
Stop
keep
him from
Bottas
winning.
happy.
It's just so savage if that's the
Because,
case.
well, if he'd have won, everybody would be in uproar to say, "Why have you not signed him yet to Mercedes? Why is Bottas here?" And I think they didn't want the heartache. But it was
Yeah,
clear to
maybe.
see he was so much faster than Bottas. He was just completely outperformed him.
Yeah, it was a great day for him.
It was, and so I think I could see George Russell being fairly strong here. It's interesting to see how the new cars react. We've got 3 DRS zones on the Bahrain circuit, and I think
3 DRS zones actually quite crazy, isn't it?
yeah, I'm just
Especially
interested
in
to
these new
see if
cars.
they can get down to the same lap times they had last year, because they were saying that these are going to be the fastest cars ever, and they won't ever kind of reach that same lap time. But from what we've seen in testing thus far, I mean, they're not far off the testing times of 2020, I think it was the last time they went to Barcelona for testing.
Yeah, they're similar. I mean, they still didn't break the track record for the Spanish track, and that track's obviously not changed one bit. I think Ricardo actually holds that record as like a 118.5, and I think 119.1 was the fastest we saw in testing from Lewis.
Yeah, and the I think you're right. And so I mean, in qualifying in the last year's race, P1 was 116. It's about 3 seconds off the pace, which sounds about right for testing. Normally they are about 3 seconds off the qualifying pace, and so it seems as though these cars are pretty much at the same point, which is really good, because it means that we get fast racing but also closer racing.
Yeah, that's what we're interested in seeing, how close these cars can keep to each other now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a few of the drives have come out this week and said, they've attempted to follow other cars a little bit more close, and they've noticed a significant difference in terms of downforce. So that's a good sign. It's shown that the regulations are kind of doing what we're expecting them to do. It's exciting at the very least. I
I
think it's
can't
going to
wait.
be a good year.
I mean, every single year, me and Tom message each other going, "I can't wait for it." It's just finished. Like Abu Dhabi finished, and it's a day later, and we go, I can't wait for Formula One to start again. Like it's just my life. I love Formula One. I
Yeah.
watch every single race religiously. I'm actually traveling to the UK. If people don't know, I'm actually from Jersey. Traveling to the UK to watch this race with Tom. How sad is that? I've told people at work, and they're all going, "What the hell's wrong with you? You're traveling to UK just to watch it on TV." I'm like, "Damn right I am. I love Formula One. And I want to watch it with people that love Formula One."
Yeah, there's just so many variables in terms of the sport. There's just nothing like it. I think obviously everybody that's listened to this podcast, if there is anybody, would agree with us on that. You know,
If you're listening to this podcast, you love Formula One.
yeah, you're deeply into it.
I don't think I would listen to anything if I wasn't deeply into it. But yeah, I mean, you always see people going, "Oh, NASCAR's better. I love NASCAR," but everyone's arguing that it's just a circle. I don't think people actually understand NASCAR in a way, to be honest, because that's not a circular track. They actually do have road tracks through that season.
Yeah,
But
I'd love to go to a NASCAR track. Not, I
yeah,
mean, a track, a
pure
race.
racing.
I think they'd be fantastic, and the fact that you can get so close to the cars.
It's pure noise as
Um,
well, isn't it?
yeah. Anyway, we've digressed. I mean, Formula One this year. I think it's a big year for Formula One as a sport in terms of what they're trying to achieve. Um, if it's a case that these regulations have achieved what we're hoping,
Then back
we're in
going
for a really good season. If not, we're in for 5 years of pretty much what
shit.
we had last
Yeah,
time.
5 years of whatever we've already had, and I don't want that at all. This is a huge year for Formula One.
Yeah, definitely.
And no Massey now as well. Oh, what a world! I reckon he
I,
was in the VAR room for the City game last night.
I mean, I thought it was interesting how Verstappen came out and said that it was harsh of them to remove Massey
Of
from that
course he would. Of
situation.
course he would.
But isn't it a bit polarizing, that view? I think that kind of shows, all right, you're a bit too close to that to be able to come out and say something like that.
Massey's a total knobhead. Max shouldn't have said anything. I just don't get it. I don't know who's replaced him now, but I'm sure he's better. It
Well, they've
has to be
got
better than Massey.
they have a rotation, I think now of
It's a team of
there's
people,
two
isn't
or
it?
three, yeah. So they rotate each race to kind of help to stop any kind of corruption. So hopefully that kind of becomes. I mean, we don't really want to be talking about the stewards and the race directors. They should be, quiet in the background. I mean, I think it's good the fact that the team principals aren't able to communicate with them this year. I thought that was wrong. As soon as we started to hear those radio messages come through, I thought that's not
It's
right.
just
That's
desperation, isn't it?
yeah. They shouldn't be lobbying um, the stewards and the race director throughout a race. That's ridiculous. I
Probably
mean,
what made it so hard for Massey, isn't it?
well, yeah, that's it. I mean, I think if you're under so much pressure, I mean, you've got Netflix filming the series, you've got more viewers than they had in the Super Bowl. I mean, 107 million viewers opposed to 101 for the Super Bowl for the Abu Dhabi Grand
I
Prix.
still can't believe that stat.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So it shows how popular sports become because I think a lot of it is due to the fact of the Netflix documentary series that have come out. And you've got a lot of new supporters on board, and there was a lot of pressure for them to put on a show. And part of me was thankful for the fact that there was a show, for us to watch since we'd travelled halfway across the world in the midst of COVID. Um,
Yeah, what a
but
pain in
we
the ass
did
that
get
ended
to
up being for
see.
you.
You didn't want to see it end under the safety car, but at the same
Yeah,
time, we said it straight away on the track. Instantly, I said that should have been red flagged. That was the most fair way to end that race because it would have allowed Hamilton to put his fresh tyres on. Verstappen could have put his fresh tyres on, and then it would have been a one-lap sprint to the end,
but it still
standing
took them
start.
ages to get the car off track as well. I think it was a good 4 or 5 laps before the car was removed.
Yeah. I mean, we were genuinely of the mindset at the track that it was going to finish under the safety car, and so, I mean, we it's very difficult. I don't know if anybody that's listening has been to a race, but it's quite difficult to hear the commentary as the cars are going past. Obviously, you've got all the fans in place, and so you don't really understand you don't get the full picture of exactly what's happening. We were seeing certain cars overtaking, unlapping themselves, and then Verstappen close to Hamilton. We were completely unaware of what was going on behind the scenes. And it was very confusing. But I was glad that we got to see a race. I mean, we were literally positioned at the corner where Verstappen made that final overtake on Hamilton. It was
Yeah,
dramatic to
new
say the
corner, isn't
least.
it? It was a brand new corner, so that was always interesting to watch. But yeah, that was the worst time ever to be a Lewis fan. I've never been. I mean, I might not have shown it in the moment. I might have been, yeah, good race that. No, inside I was kicking everything. I was kicking off. I was pretty pissed. I could have broke many laws. But yeah, I mean, what the hell happened there? I mean, what even? But yeah, great race to be there, and we were in the center of the world in that point. So many people watching.
Yeah, and I think that's only good for the sport. I mean, I think the more fans that get involved, the more the sport progresses. I mean, it's a shame that it's taken people so long to kind of get into the sport itself. It's one of those things where you have to fully invest into it. You can't be half-hearted in terms of watching a certain few races throughout the season, because you lose continuity in terms of where teams should be. And where drivers should be, how well they're performing, where they've been historically. You need that information to kind of give a fuller picture of exactly what's happening in a race.
There's a lot to understand in this hybrid era, especially. I think. I mean, back in the day, it was kind of it wasn't tech based. It was just racing.
Yeah, I mean the sport is so technically complex now, but I mean that also provides so many other parameters and so much more information that you can be looking into. It's not always a case of who's in front. There's many battles that are happening all throughout the field, and obviously everybody that's listening to this will obviously know of these. But it's.
But maybe not. We could have some brand new Formula One fans here.
Maybe not. If you are brand new, let us know. We want to hear from you.
I definitely want to know, because it's a really interesting sport to get into. I know some people are going to watch first race of the season and go, oh, not much is happening. Well, maybe in previous years, hopefully this year's different. But this could be the first year where we see overtake after overtake just because of the new car.
Yeah, well, I mean, interestingly on that point, I mean, a lot of the renders that were coming out of the cars when they launched them were excluding DRS, and obviously the cars at testing have included it now because it's mandatory. But it'll be interesting to see how that progresses throughout the season. I mean, they're saying that the DRS shouldn't be very powerful at all, and I'm not the biggest fan of DRS. I feel like it's too forced, it's too artificial in terms of providing overtake. It's literally just a button to overtake. Well, it was last year at least anyway. I don't want to see that. You want to see getting closer and closer to each lap. And exactly.
It makes no sense to have DRS, because the person, if you're out front and there's no one at the back of the pack, how does that make sense as well? That's another thing with DRS. If you're catching up to the back markers, you get DRS on the car that's in last.
Yeah.
And that's just insane. I mean, Mazepin's going to be basically giving everyone DRS.
You know what I think they should also bring back is the old rule of lapped cars don't get blue flagged. It's a case that you have to fight through the field.
Yeah, but then like the sister teams, people like AlphaTauri are going to be the biggest tools for Red Bull. I'd love to see it, but it'd be pretty broken, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Nikita Mazepin denying Lewis Hamilton of an 8th world championship.
Taking out Lewis like a torpedo. We probably shouldn't say that after what Russia have done. Jesus.
Yeah. Let's not go there.
There's a lot to see this year. I think it's an interesting year. I cannot wait.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting. So I mean, we're looking forward. I think we'll be doing a podcast after the next test in Bahrain, which is in a couple of weeks' time. We might even do a little piece the week before that, actually, on a separate topic. But I think it's exciting to see what's going to happen in this second test. We'll get to kind of get a feel for exactly what the cars are going to look like in terms of their race trim. And then shortly after that, we'll have the race itself, the first race, and we'll be given a full kind of rundown of our thoughts and feelings on that. I'm sure there'll be some controversy throughout that race. We'll get a feel for exactly what the racing is going to be like, what the teams are like, what the drivers are like. It's going to be a cracking start to the new year.
Yeah, I can't wait. Cannot wait. I think the beef between Lewis and Max, hopefully that continues a little bit, gives us some good racing. Yeah,
we need to see a bit of a fight there between those two. There's
got to be, right? There has to be.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, well, thanks for listening. Obviously, make sure you're listening out. We'll be providing another podcast, I think, a short one, just to kind of explain, what this podcast series is going to be like. Our stance on the whole thing. We aren't experts in any way, shape, or form. We're just two Formula One fans that obsess over it week in, week out, and just want to voice our opinions. And so we'll do a separate podcast on exactly what this is about. But thank you for listening. If there is anybody out there that is, let us know. And we will see you again in the next one.
All right.
Thanks very much.